Ever glance at a pond and think it's just, still water and maybe a few ducks gliding around?
Uh-huh.
Well, get ready to have your underwater world expanded. We're about to plunge into the fascinating realm of submerged aquatic plants.
Exactly. We've delved into resources from places like Texas A&M AgriLife Extension and USDA databases, really solid sources.
Right.
And we're aiming to bring you a closer look at these often, well, unsung heroes of freshwater ecosystems.
Think of this as gaining some serious pond knowledge, maybe, but without needing a scuba suit.
That's a good way to put it.
Our mission today is basically to pull out the most compelling and important details about several key players beneath the surface.
Yep, we'll be focusing on, let's see, American pondweed, Asian marshweed, baby pondweed.
Right. Brittle water nymph, marine naiad, which I gather is also called brittle or spiny naiad.
Correct. And southern naiad, sometimes known as bushy pondweed.
Okay, quite a list. Where should we start?
Let's dive right in with American pondweed. Scientifically, it's Potamajutan nodosus. What immediately strikes you about this one?
Well, reading about it, it's almost like this plant has two different personalities, judging by its leaves anyway.
Oh, so?
You've got these slender, almost delicate oval leaves that stay underwater. Some can get pretty long, like up to 8 inches.
Right, those are the submersed leaves. But then, in stark contrast, it also produces floating leaves.
Ah, okay. And they're different.
Oh, yeah. Much tougher. Kind of leathery in texture. They grow on longer stalks, and they have a more rounded, elliptical shape. They max out around maybe 4 inches long, give or take.
Huh. Really shows how plants adapt, doesn't it? Different leaves for different spots.
Precisely. It highlights how they adapt to different parts of their environment underwater versus the surface.
Absolutely. And I read the flower is interesting too. Greenish brown, kind of oval, and it doesn't move. Sits right where the leaf stalk meets the stem.
That's the one. And the stem itself is pretty simple, often flattened, quite thin, really. And if you were to dig around the base, you might see a whitish underground stem. That's the rhizome. And it often has these little rusty red spots on it.
Okay. And the roots just branch out from that rhizome.
Exactly.
So where does American pondweed typically set up shop? Ponds, lakes?
You'll usually find it in streams and lakes, yeah. And ecologically, this plant is, well, it's a real workhorse.
A workhorse? How?
It's a significant food source, especially for ducks and various other wildlife. But here's where it gets particularly interesting. Its role goes beyond just being food itself.
Okay, tell me more. What else does it do?
Well, those submerged parts, the underwater leaves and stems, they don't just feed ducks directly, they create essential habitat, like little underwater forests for tiny invertebrates, micro and macro ones.
Ah, the little bugs and critters.
Exactly. And those little creatures then become a food source for a whole wide array of animals, fish, amphibians, reptiles, and yes, even more ducks feeding on the invertebrates.
Wow. Okay, it's like a whole chain reaction.
It really is. And even when the plant eventually dies and breaks down, it becomes what we call detritus. Think of it as like organic crumbs at the bottom. And that detritus feeds even more of those aquatic invertebrates, the whole interconnected web of life, really foundational.
It really sounds like a cornerstone for a healthy pond ecosystem.
Yeah.
That contrast between the delicate submerged leaves and the tougher floating ones is quite vivid now. Okay, let's switch gears. What about Asian marshweed, Limnophila sessiliflora? Now, this one has a rather different reputation, doesn't it?
It certainly does. The crucial thing to understand about Asian marshweed, right off the bat, is that it's not native to North America.
Ah, okay. An import. Where is it from?
It originally hails from India, Ceylon, and the Philippines, and this is where we start seeing a potential downside.
A downside. How so?
Well, while it has some, visually interesting characteristics, its presence can actually be quite detrimental to native ecosystems. Let's talk about what it looks like first, though.
Okay.
Its leaves grow in these circular arrangements. They're called whorls around the stem. If the plant is growing out of the water, these leaves are dark green, sort of sword-shaped, with toothed edges, usually in groups of 5 to 8.
And they're small.
Yeah, relatively small, only about 1/4 to 1/2 inch long or so.
And what happens when it's underwater? Do the leaves change?
They do. Submerged leaves become really feathery, almost delicate looking, and they're arranged in opposite pairs along the stem. Big difference.
Huh. Okay. What about flowers?
The flowers are small, they don't have stalks, sessile technically, and they appear singly right at the very top of the plant, usually above the water.
Are they noticeable?
They can be quite attractive, actually. Petals in shades of blue, lavender, pink, or violet. And the upper part of the flower is kind of neat. It has this white or pink upper lip with 2 little blue dots and then 3 fuzzy oval sections below that.
It sounds quite delicate and, well, pretty.
It does have an appealing look, I'll give it that.
Yeah.
It also produces a small dry seed pod. Interesting thing here is it changes color depending on where it is.
Oh.
Yeah, it's greenish-brown underwater, but turns dark brown when it's above the surface.
Okay. And the stem, does it get big?
The stem itself can grow surprisingly long, maybe up to 12 feet in some cases, and the top portion often stands upright out of the water. Plus, it has this ability to root at various points along its stem, at the nodes.
Which helps it spread, I imagine.
Exactly. It helps it spread quite effectively.
So with such an attractive flower and interesting features, what's the actual problem? Why the bad reputation?
Okay, here's the catch. Here's where it becomes a real issue.
Yeah.
Asian marshweed can be an incredibly aggressive invader.
Invasive.
Highly invasive. If it forms these really dense mats on the water's surface, it can block out sunlight entirely.
Which is bad for things underneath.
Very bad. It leads to a lack of oxygen in the water below hypoxia or anoxia, and unfortunately that can lead to fish kills, big ones sometimes.
Yikes. That's a significant negative impact.
It is. A major impact. Because of this potential to cause serious harm, it's really vital to keep it under control. In Texas, for instance, it's actually illegal to possess or even transport this species.
Really? Illegal?
Yep. And if you happen to spot it, the official instruction is to report it immediately to the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. They want to know where it is.
Wow. That's a stark contrast to the beneficial role of American pondweed we just talked about.
Night and day, really.
It's surprising that something with such a delicate floral description can be so disruptive. All right, let's move on to something with maybe a cuter name. Baby pondweed, Potamocan pusillus.
Huh, yeah. But don't let the baby in the name mislead you too much. It still plays an important part in the ecosystem.
Okay. How's it different from American pondweed?
Well, for one, unlike American pondweed, all of the baby pondweed's leaves stay underwater. There are no floating leaves.
Ah, okay. And what do they look like?
They're long and thin, linear light green, and they can reach up to maybe 2 3/4 inches long, but they're quite narrow.
Gotcha. And the flowers, are they similar to the other pondweed?
Not quite. The flowers are really small and kind of fan-shaped with a slender base or claw, tiny, maybe 1/10 of an inch long. The fruits that follow are also small and oval.
Okay. And what about the stems? Anything notable there?
The stems are characterized by having numerous branches. They themselves are slender and slightly flattened or compressed. And interestingly, the upper parts of the plant often die back in colder weather, leaving behind these tough little buds called winter buds or torians that allow the plant to survive and regrow.
Clever survival strategy. Where does baby pondweed typically grow?
It seems to thrive in water that's neutral or maybe slightly alkaline, even a bit brackish or salty. You find it in both ponds and rivers. And a key characteristic is that it often forms very dense underwater masses.
So despite the baby name, it can actually be quite abundant.
Very abundant. It can form huge beds underwater.
And what about its ecological significance? Is it beneficial like American pondweed? Or more problematic?
Oh, definitely beneficial. Baby pondweed is considered excellent food for waterfowl.
What parts do they eat?
They consume both the small fruits and also the underground tubers it sometimes produces, as well as the leaves. And just like American pondweed, its submerged structure provides that crucial habitat for tiny aquatic invertebrates.
Right, the base of the food web again.
Exactly, which in turn become food for a wider range of aquatic life. And of course, the decaying plant matter also contributes vital nutrients back into the system, that detritus pathway again.
It's interesting how something called baby pondweed can create such extensive growth and be such a valuable food source. Nature often packs a punch in small packages, huh?
It certainly does. Surprising details everywhere.
Okay, next up is brittle water nymph, Naja's minor. The name itself, brittle, kind of hints at its physical characteristics, I suppose.
That's right. And this is another plant that isn't native to North America. It's originally from Eurasia and Africa, I believe, although it has become quite widespread here now, naturalized.
Okay. So what are the leaves like? Still brittle?
Yes, the name fits. The leaves grow in opposite pairs. They're a dark green color, and they have noticeably toothed edges. Usually 7 to 15 little teeth on each side, which is quite a lot for a small leaf.
How big are they?
They're relatively small, reaching up to maybe 1 1/3 inches in length, but quite narrow.
Got it. And what about its flowers and seeds? Anything distinctive?
It produces one or two tiny flowers right at the base of each leaf, where the leaf joins the stem, the axil. They're really small, only about 8/10 of an inch long, hard to spot. The seeds are maybe more distinctive. They're spindle-shaped and a purplish color, just over 1/10 of an inch long.
Okay. What about the stem structure? Also brittle.
The stem is quite thin, maybe 4/100 of an inch in diameter, and typically grows from around 4 to almost 8 inches in length. The whole plant has a tendency to fragment easily, hence the brittle name.
Right, that makes sense. And where would you typically find brittle water nymph growing?
It's pretty adaptable, actually. It can be found in various freshwater environments, lakes, ponds, rivers, streams. It gets around.
Okay. But I sense a but coming. The brittle description might also apply to its ecological role. Is it useful?
You guessed it. That's where the comparison ends, really. Unlike some of the other plants we've discussed, brittle water nymph offers little to no direct food value for most wildlife.
Ah, so ducks aren't interested.
Generally, no.
Yeah.
Not a preferred food source. And because it's not a native species, it's generally not something we want to encourage spreading in our waterways.
So it's discouraged. Is it illegal, like the Asian marshweed?
Well, it's not legally prohibited in Texas like Asian marshweed is, but the recommendation is certainly not to introduce it to new bodies of water. And if it's already present and causing problems, like crowding out native plants, the advice is often to treat it with herbicide to manage it.
So brittle, not just in its physical form, but maybe also in its limited contribution to the ecosystem. Almost fragile in its ecological value.
That's a fair way to think about it. It doesn't add much value and can potentially cause issues. An important distinction to make.
Definitely. Okay, now we have marine naiad, not just marina. I notice it's also called brittle naiad and spiny naiad. Having multiple common names often suggests something interesting or maybe confusion.
It does. Often points to regional differences or maybe variations in the plant itself. The leaves of marine naiad are indeed brittle, like the water nymph we just discussed. They're long and thin, linear, and rather stiff with noticeably toothed edges. They grow up to about 1.5 inches long.
Oh, and the stems.
The stems are branched and tend to have a brownish hue. Again, quite brittle.
And where does it prefer to grow? Just freshwater.
It can actually tolerate both freshwater and slightly salty or brackish conditions. You'll most often find it in lakes and ponds, though.
Right. What about its ecological role, then? Does it lean towards being a beneficial food source like some pondweeds, or is it more like the less helpful brittle water nymph?
This one leans towards beneficial. Fortunately, marine naiad is readily eaten by ducks. They seem to quite like it.
Oh, good. So despite the brittle connection, it's useful.
Yes, and much like many other submerged plants, it plays that crucial role of providing shelter and habitat for those tiny aquatic creatures. Plus, it contributes to the detritus food chain when it decomposes. Standard submerged plant benefits.
So despite a name suggesting fragility, it actually provides a valuable food source.
Yeah.
The different common names probably just reflect regional variations or maybe subtle differences in its appearance, like how spiny the teeth are.
Exactly. Could be either or both.
Okay, finally, we have southern naiad, Najas guadalupensis. It's also known as bushy pondweed. That name, bushy, makes it sound like it might grow quite densely.
It certainly can live up to that name. Its leaves are long and thin, linear again, up to about 1 inch in length. And their arrangement can vary, sometimes opposite pairs, sometimes slightly staggered or alternate along the stem.
And like baby pondweed, all underwater.
Correct. All of its leaves remain submerged. They also tend to taper, getting gradually smaller towards the tip. And the tip usually has 1 or 2 tiny spines.
Spines again. Okay, what about the base of the leaf?
The base of the leaf is typically rounded or slopes slightly where it attaches to the stem.
Got it. And the stems, are they bushy too?
Well, they are slender and branching, which contributes to the bushy appearance. They can grow to around 2 feet long, creating that dense look. It also produces small, dull, kind of elliptical-shaped seeds.
Okay. Where does southern naiad typically establish itself? Similar places?
Pretty much. You'll find it commonly in lakes and ponds, but interestingly, it's often mistaken for other plants.
Oh, like what?
Sago pondweed, Stachynia pectinata, and widgeon grass, Rupia maritima.
Okay.
They can look quite similar underwater if you're not looking closely.
Huh. That really highlights how diverse and sometimes confusingly similar these underwater plants can be, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Identification can be tricky sometimes.
So from an ecological perspective, what's the importance of southern naiad? Is it another good one?
Oh yes, it's quite significant, especially for waterfowl. Its leafy parts, the vegetation itself, and its seeds are consumed by many different species of ducks. It's often considered a primary food source for them in areas where it's abundant.
A primary food source, that's pretty important.
Very important. And, like the others, it also contributes significantly to providing habitat for invertebrates and, of course, to that breakdown of organic matter, the detritus.
So another key food source supporting the ecosystem. And the fact that it's easily confused with other plants just underscores the variety we find down there.
Precisely.
Now, we've looked at these specific examples, quite a range actually, but stepping back, how would you generally describe submerged aquatic plants as a whole group? What defines them?
In general terms, submerged plants are typically rooted in the sediment at the bottom. They tend to have flexible, almost limp stems because the water supports them. And while the name says the majority of their growth, their mass, occurs below the water surface.
Sometimes bits pop out.
Yeah, that's right. However, it's not uncommon for small parts, like maybe flowers or the very tips of stems, to occasionally emerge above the water surface. But the bulk is submerged.
And we've really only scratched the surface today, haven't we? I mean, the sources we looked at mentioned a whole lot more species.
Oh, absolutely. We picked a handful to focus on, but the diversity is huge. Just to give you and our listeners a broader sense, other submerged plants you might encounter include things like, kabomba, which is also called fanwort.
Right.
Coontail, curly-leaf pondweed, another Ponemogotin cutleaf watermilfoil, East Indian hygrophila, often just called hygro, eelgrass, which forms those crucial underwater meadows in some areas.
Okay, yeah.
Egeria, Elodia, Eurasian watermilfoil, that's another problematic invasive. Fine-leaf pondweed, floating pondweed, Gulf swampweed, horned pondweed, hydrilla, maybe the most notorious invasive aquatic plant in North America.
Wow, that's a lot.
Keep going. Illinois pondweed, Indian swampweed, large leaf pondweed, leafy pondweed, parrot's feather, ribbon leaf pondweed, Richardson's pondweed, sago pondweed, the one southern naiad gets confused with, spotted pondweed, starhorn, variable leaf pondweed, variable leaf watermilfoil, waterthread pondweed, water wisteria, widgeon grass, and willow-leafed hygrophila.
Okay, point taken. That really gives you a sense of how many different types there are just hiding under the surface.
It truly does, a whole underwater world of plants.
And what a range we've seen today, from being absolutely vital food sources that support entire food webs, like American and southern naiad, to posing really serious threats as invasive species, like Asian marshweed. It's remarkable how different their characteristics and their ecological impacts can be.
It really is. They play such varied roles. Some are essential, some are problematic, some are just sort of there, like the brittle water nymph, perhaps.
Right, so the next time you're near a pond or a lake, maybe take a closer look down into the water's edge.
Yeah, you might just spot some of these fascinating plants we talked about. And maybe remember the hidden life and all those ecological connections they support right there, just beneath the surface.
Definitely gives you a new perspective. Knowing all this, it makes you wonder, doesn't it, what other unseen processes and relationships might be happening right now in our local ponds and lakes?
Absolutely. There's always more going on down there than meets the eye. It certainly gives you a new appreciation for these often overlooked underwater ecosystems.